Okay, we are back again with Dr. Murat Ozveri in part two of our conversation about training during the lockdown and different ways to stay fit and healthy, and also talking about some of his recent Instagram posts on testing some new Simsek bows as well. We wanted to ask about that and a couple of other things. The last meeting we had, the connection wasn't great, so we're just going to recap some of the interesting topics we were talking about, and then we'll hopefully move on from there and look at maybe some images and videos that Dr. Murat sent me. So Murat, thanks again for giving us your time. Perhaps you might want to maybe recap our last conversation and just go over those things again.
Sure. First of all, the idea was of our previous interview is giving an idea to people, especially to archers, how they can practice at home during lockdown, because it is obvious that we are going to be under these circumstances for some time more, because the pandemic will take more time. Even we have the vaccines in our hand. Well, the thing is, a part of this practice is, of course, the archery practices that we are asking our trainees to do. They are asked to pull kepaze bows every day when they start training here under Tirandas. But of course, kepaze, the weaker bows that are meant to help the candidate acquire the muscle memory to pull the ball properly. These balls are weak, and there's not too much. Can you hear me, Jihad?
Yes.
Okay. These balls were either self bows or maybe sinew backed bows. So about their construction, there's not too much information. But what we know for sure is that these bows were weak, because in archery, the biomechanics is quite sophisticated. There are some muscle groups that you have to learn to flex while you learn to keep some others loose. But interestingly, these two muscle groups are acting towards the same direction. For example, when you're pulling a bow, on the pulling side, your back muscles as well as your biceps work. But at full draw, you have to keep your muscle loose in order to keep some other muscles of the forearm that synergistically act with biceps loose as well. This is the only way to have a sharp and clean release. And a proper back tension usually helps having a cleaner release. But during kepaze stage, which is the very first stage in the training of Turkish traditional archery, you learn this, and this is why instructs the candidate during this stage. But the main goal is achieving or acquiring this muscle memory by doing repetitive pulls, which is actually has a scientific explanation, because when we repeat anything, then the electrical transfer between the nerve cells gets faster. And this is because of the structure of the nerve cells. There's an extended part of a nerve cell to the other nerve cell. These nerve cells are called neurons, and these neurons are connected to each other with this extended part via these axons. And these axons conducts electrical impulses, and these impulses are what we say this neurological transfer of everything, the data. So there's a sheath around these axons, and this sheath gets thicker when we do repetitive movements. So if it comes to playing a musical instrument, to learning any martial art, the fundamentals are usually based on repeating basic movements or basic exercises. For example, if you read anything about karate, they said that the experts or the authors mentioned that a simple exercise takes 10,000 repetitions to master or just to learn. And interestingly, in the old Ottoman treatises, the same is said for the Kepaze stage. It said that 12,000 pulls are necessary for the candidate to really understand how the bow is pulled properly. So according to our experience, it is so. So in Tirandas, for example, this first stage takes 8 weeks, and we ask the candidate to pull 200 times a day, which makes 12,000 almost in 2 months. So and this was a traditional approach. But and of course, if it comes to archery practices during lockdown or in lockdown, Kepaze is a very good choice, because it is not only for the beginners but also for archers of any level to maintain this muscle memory. So I'm a strong believer that Kepaze and Torba, the 2 early stages of training, are essential. And I also believe, even if you don't have the chance to shoot for longer distances, to practice for longer distances, your skill would be enough even to shoot at longer distances if you are you really master Kepaze and Torba. But I have to also say that there were contra arguments about that, but it was clearly discussed by the ancient experts as well. An author and an Ottoman archer of 17th century mentioned in his book that flight shooting was considered to be a sportive activity only, and it has no benefits to acquire skills for war archery. But he said, no, for shooting at longer distances in war, flight archery is necessary. And he says that some believe that these early stages, Kepaze and Torba, is all about it to learn archery, but he thinks that shooting for farther distances, even just for distance, is good and provides some benefits for the archer to use the bow for military purposes as well. So anyway,
can I just ask one question there, Dr. Murat? Sorry to interrupt. with Kepaze, is it important that the candidate must pull with both arms, the stronger side and weaker side, or just one? And if so, why?
No. Well, okay, we ask them to do that ambidextrously, both sides, just to avoid any injuries. Because if you work a muscle or a muscle group without hitting its antagonists, then you're going to get an injury sooner or later. So you have to have a balanced development in your muscles. Of course, Kepaze is not for muscle development; it is for muscle memory. But still, if you do that ambidextrously, it avoids having injuries. And of course, in the later stages of our training, we also practice shooting ambidextrously, because it was mentioned in old Mamluk treatises. And therefore, at least from on horseback, they shot ambidextrously. But of course, the dominant eye is what it is about in accuracy. This is what I mean, and it is also supported by the scientific studies in sports sciences. It is easier to learn to shoot with your weak hand, while the recessive eye is not very easy to train. So therefore, you have to shoot. You have to decide whether you're right-handed or left-handed, depending on your dominant eye, not on your dominant side or dominant hand. But at the end, the ancient archers, at least the mounted archers, shot both-sided. So it may be, of course, because of the limited distance between the archer and the target on horseback, and it was probably performed in very short distances in which the archer was unable to maneuver the horse. So instead, he just changed the hand and shot from a very short distance, just in split seconds, just to perform an emergency shot. This is what I believe. But it is possible to have an accepted accuracy from shorter distances, and we are teaching that as well, but in later stages to our experienced archers. And kepaze is not only for learning or acquiring the muscle memory needed to pull a bow, but it is also a great tool to recover after an injury. Because as an athlete, you may be an archer or can do other sports, you may encounter injuries sooner or later. But it is not that important, because it's not the goal, but the way that you walk on to reach that goal. It is a lifestyle if you're a real athlete. So you have to accept, if not embrace, these injuries in your life, and you have to learn to recover fast. And kepaze is a great tool to recover from these kind of injuries. Or if you have to give a long break to archery, and there are such cases among our students as well. They're going to military service, they get married, and they somehow give long breaks to archery. And to be back, to regain the abilities and skills, kepaze works really great. And if it comes to learning some new techniques, as it was clearly mentioned in all treatises, kepaze is again an essential tool. For example, we talked about different grip techniques. You may remember when you visited Istanbul.
I was going to ask about that, yeah.
Yes, for example, kepaze, the falcon talon, is a different grip technique and requires a different muscle memory as well as muscle coordination and strength. So for that purpose, for example, I practiced for 8 months kepaze to be able to control middleweight bows without using a mushamba or a grip wrapping in Çengibaz. So this is also mentioned, by the way, in I think it's a 19th century treatise, it is mentioned that you have to practice Çengibaz grip with kepaze, even if you are an advanced archer.
Right.
So kepaze is such a multi-purpose tool, and during lockdown, it is really that works in order to maintain your skill, in order to acquire new abilities like a new grip technique or whatever. And of course, although it was not meant to increase your strength, you may have some stronger kepaze to build some strength as well. But this is not the main goal. But I, for example, have 3 different kepazes in different draw weights. So it may also be helpful in gaining some strength. But other than that, as a direct archery practice in lockdown, if you are an advanced archer, you can practice some skills like fast knocking and fast shooting. It is also possible. This is something I always recommend my students to do. You don't have to be in a range to practice these skills. You can simply sit in a couch, having in your pajamas, and you can just knock and release, knock and release, knock and release. Of course, the youngsters should be careful with their mom, and the married guys should be careful with their wives, and they mustn't pierce anything around. So you have to put something that would stop the arrows, or you would learn to pull the string just a few centimeters and just release it from the string and put the other arrow. And that way, this is something I am doing as well. It is really good to acquire the skill as well as to maintain the skill. So I have to say, as a conclusion, I'm a strong believer that Kepaze and Torba training is the fundamental and maybe all what it is about. So you don't have to really practice long shots. And if you master these or the skills that you can practice and master on Kepaze and Torba, it's okay. And Torba, which is the second stage of the training, of course, if you have some place at home, you can practice Torba as well. And if you can, of course, take the precautions, because shooting a regular weight bow at home may be dangerous. So you have to have a very good backstop, a well-made or a commercially available target butt. And of course, if you are not good enough, then you have to use aluminum arrows to avoid any splits if the arrows happen to break. Because in Torba distances, the arrow oscillation is quite high, and on a very hard, solid target butt, the arrows may get broken. So therefore, for example, I can do that with wooden arrows as well, but I'm quite experienced. For beginners or for the ones who are not that experienced yet, they have to use aluminum arrows, because the aluminum arrows bend when they do it wrong, but it can be straightened even by hand, and they can continue practicing. But Torba has some negative, not negative consequences, some disadvantages. For example, if you live in an apartment in a city like Istanbul, it's a cosmopolitan city with a lot of people next to each other, it is quite noisy. So we don't realize that when we're shooting in our archery ranges, but when you do that at home, you see then the hitting of the arrow to the target butt makes big noise, especially when you do that in the evening when you're back from the school or from the job. It may be very disturbing for the neighbors. So Torba can be practiced only under these circumstances. If you have a good target butt and if you have good backstop and everything is okay, it is very important to avoid any possible danger or injuries. And as you told me, we had talked about these Instagram posts before, not only archery practice, but some other fitness that you can do at home. And of course, it is not only because we need to maintain our general health and fitness, but also it is related to archery, because Adam Karpovic, the famous bowyer, who is also a mentor of mine, once said that it is not enough for us to replicate the bows and the arrows to revive traditional archery, but we have to recreate or replicate the archers as well. And if it comes to replicating the archers, we have to understand how the ancient warriors practiced not only archery, but what they did to gain strength and to maintain strength, because war was based on physical strength for centuries. It has been based on physical strength for centuries. And for that purpose, they systematically practiced not only directly with the weapons they had to use and on the battlefield, but also they practiced to gain the strength that was necessary to use these weapons. And for that purpose, for example, a few years ago, I wrote an article with co-author of mine, Mr. Shinasi Acar, about the sport maces used in the Ottoman Empire. This is a big culture that is originated from India. It's called Kushtuvan Pehlivani, a sort of wrestling, a sort of ancient martial art. And this martial art has some strength training ideas and customs in it. And these customs and these ideas have been adopted by the Persian culture, and then via Iran, it came to Anatolia as well, because we have some records from the era of Sultan Murat IV. He was a renowned athlete, a very strong man, and he was also interested in using these sport maces. And these maces and similar devices are still being used in Iran in the traditional gyms called zorhane. Zor is strength in Persian. We adopted that word as well. So in Turkish, we have this word with a slightly different meaning. Zor means difficulty in Turkish, but it is originally Persian and means strength. So zorhane in Persian is strength house. So it's a sort of gym.
Yeah.
And this zorhane culture is in the intangible cultural heritage list of UNESCO as well. So it is a very, very exceptional and priceless part of the world's culture. So, and as seen in one of the footages you showed, I included some of these exercises to my daily workout routine as well. These meals, for example, these club bells that I was swinging above my head is a zorhane technique and tool. Thank you very much. You sent me the links of the interview that you did with this Iranian athlete, at zorhane athlete. We have been in touch with this Iranian zorhane enthusiasts as well. Harun Deniz, one of the instructors of Tirandaz, went to Iran to get a short course from the zorhane instructors. So it is very important. These kind of exercises are different than the better known Western style strength training. Here, the resistance, whether it's a free weight or your body weight or whatever, it is not lifted on a single plane. Instead, it is moved on 6 different planes. So therefore, the joint involvement is completely different, and the flexing of the muscles is also different. So this kind of training is called 3D functional training, and it has a comeback in the Western world as well in the last decade, or maybe in the last 2 decades, because especially the martial artists, the MMA fighters, for example, are very much interested in this, because that way their strength gets more, while their body weight doesn't change too much. So unlike the modern approach, you don't have to be muscular and good looking. The only thing they needed was strength. And of course, this kind of training had all the other benefits of strength training. Whether you do the strength training of the Western tradition, or whether you do the strength training of this ancient tradition, the benefits are the same. So it is not only gaining strength, but like Kepaze, during recovery from an injury, it is a great tool. I mean, strength training as a tool is a great thing to do. And of course, for general health, even the cardiovascular health is getting better when you're doing strength training. And in the last decade or so, there was a recrowning of strength training in terms of its benefits to cardiovascular health, because beforehand it's believed that only the aerobic exercises were good for the cardiovascular health. But then they also found out with scientific studies, with the help of scientific studies, that even the strength training, the anaerobic exercises, have some benefits on cardiovascular health, although it is not as much as the aerobic exercises. So aerobic exercises should be in your life as an athlete, but strength training alone is quite a good way, an easier way, because for doing some aerobic things you have to go out bicycling or running or whatever. But for strength training, you can use methods that can be easily followed at home. And in fact, these Instagram posts consisted of a series of videos advocating that it is possible to maintain your physical fitness and even increase it during lockdown by using only your body weight and some few equipment. So therefore, and by the way, I have to say that body weight exercises, which is called calisthenics, this is a Greek word, or two words in fact, meaning strength and beauty, by the way. So the calisthenic or bodyweight exercises were the main tool of the ancient warriors as well. So not only these maces and the other equipment, but they mainly use their own body weight, because your muscles really don't mind whether you use your body weight, a kettlebell, a dumbbell, a barbell. Your muscles don't care, okay?
Right.
It is our brain actually that seeks for beautiful environment, gyms and beautiful music around, beautiful girls and boys around. This is for our brain. For our muscles really don't mind. If you put some resistance on it, they go bigger and they go stronger. And therefore, as an archer, like any other athlete, you have to take it into consideration that you have to maintain your physical strength and power. This is something which is not emphasized enough, but it was really a great statement of Adam Karpovich that we have to recreate the archers as well. Okay, among the traditional archers, there are some few, or maybe most of them are like that, who just pick up the bow at the weekend, go to the range and shoot. And it is also okay. They want to hold a piece of history in their hands by shooting a traditional bow, and it is quite acceptable. But if you are an enthusiast, if you're doing it, if you're taking it seriously, then you have to do something to have a physical base as well. As an athlete, as an archer, you have to be stronger. And even if you don't want to be a strong archer who can handle 90-pound, 120-pound bows, to avoid injuries, it makes sense to strength train, especially for archers like me, I mean, who are getting older. As you see, I'm hesitating to say that I'm old, who are getting older.
You're not that old, Dr. Murat. Don't worry, don't worry. You're still young at heart.
Excuse me?
You're still young at heart.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Anyway, we all are, and so strength training is good to avoid the so-called sarcopenia. Sarcopenia is losing the muscle mass. This is physiological. So with the changes of your hormonal secretions, the amount of the hormones you secrete, the muscle mass is getting lost after the age of 40 only, unfortunately. So, and in the first 10 years, so until the age of 50, you can easily lose 1.5 kilogram of muscle mass. And after the age of 50, it is worse and worse. So, and all the problems, or many of the problems that the elderly have to face, like, for example, falling and breaking any limb of their body, it is because of the strength lost and muscle lost. So even that is a good motivation to start strength training, and it is really not that complicated, especially if you use your body weight. You don't need to go to a gym, you don't need to have sophisticated equipment.
Right.
I can say, and this is what I have been advocating on my Instagram posts as well, that if a beginner decides to to do that only with his or her body weight, he or she can do that for at least 2-3 years without needing any other equipment. And then the equipment he or she will need would be quite simple. Just some rubber elastic bands, a few kettlebells or dumbbells. So as I said, you don't have to establish a sophisticated, expensive gym at home.
Right. It can be quite easy and straightforward. I just wanted to ask about regarding the Torba. You sent some very interesting pictures here of you at the club, and also the Kudo have their own version of Torba.
Yes.
The word in Arabic, the word Torba, I think the origin means dust or earth. I don't know if that has any significance or meaning in Turkish. Is there any
No,
there at all or not?
Torba, I think Torba is Turkish. Maybe there is a similarity with Torba dust, but Torba means bag. This training or this stage of training was called either Torba, which means bag, or chests, depending on the target used, because the target was either a bag which was filled with cotton sow and cotton seed and sawdust, or a chest filled with sand, and one side of the chest was left open so that the arrows can be shot through. So the arrows are either stopped with this bag filled with cotton seed, or by the sand in the chest. So we preferred to use the term Torba, but sandık was also used. So both are correct.
All right.
So the rationale of this training is actually learning to release, because Kepaze was meant to learn pulling the bow, how to pull the bow, using the proper muscles with the proper coordination. And the second stage is learning to release, which is hatra, or khatra, maybe with a better pronunciation because it is an Arabic word. The movement that the bow hand does during release, and farka, which is again an Arabic word, which means separating, like tefrik, and which refers to the string which is released from the hand. So these two parts, what the bow hand does and what the pulling hand does, this part of the technique is learned in Torba training. And it is, of course, not that simple. What we are trying to master here is controlling the initial oscillation of the arrow, because independent on the release, the arrow's flight will be corrected by the fletching. But of course, depending on the spine of the shaft and of the weight of the bow, the accuracy will be diminished. But if it comes to shooting with thumb release and with hatra, the bow would digest a much wider spectrum of spine. So probably the ancient thumb ring shooters did not mind too much about the spine, because with a very good hatra, you can really shoot almost any spine of the shaft. But the hatra is quite important. And farke is also important. You have to have a very sharp release, and the fundamental of the release is, interestingly, kepaze again, because in the kepaze you have to learn to flex some of the muscles that are working to the same direction, while you have to keep the others loose. Otherwise, you cannot open your hand fast enough. So in Olympic archery, there are some scientific studies conducted by Professor Hayri Ertan, whom I personally met as well. He used some electromyograph to understand which muscles are involved in good release. So he worked on some Olympic archers, elite Olympic archers, and he checked the activities of the forearm muscles. There's no study like this performed on thumb release yet, but I have been anatomy and which muscles purpose to understand the mechanics of the perfect hatra when you're shooting with thumb release. So of course I have some ideas, and I hope my third archer explain all these, and hopefully maybe with the support of some scientific studies.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. Would definitely like to hear the outcome of that as well. When you go on.
And excuse me, maybe I have to add a few more words about Torba, because you mentioned already that Judo and other thumb shooting traditions have similar devices. There are at least two, to my best knowledge. One of them is Makiwara in Judo, and the other one is Gozen in Chinese archery. And they're similar devices, so different than the. So, and most of the enthusiastic archers are aware of the importance of this tool and of this stage of the training. For example, Justin Ma, who also translated a 17th century Chinese archery manual, military archery manual to English, autographed copy of the book, and he signed it. Really good. It was, let me remember and quote it. He said, "To an archer who understands the importance of Gozan and Torba," something like that, because we are really believing in the importance of fundamentals. Both Justin and some other enthusiasts I know from the society, from the community.
That's very good. Yes, I remember the interesting conversation I had with Justin. We may have touched upon some of this basic training as well, amongst many other topics. Let me ask Dr. Murat, when you're shooting your wooden arrows, do you also have experience with bamboo shafts? And if so, which do you prefer? And is there a difference? Because bamboo is obviously hollow and the wooden ones are not.
Jihad, please excuse me, but you froze for a couple of seconds and I really missed your sentence. I'm sorry, could you repeat it?
No problem, no problem. I said, when you're shooting with wooden arrows, do you have any experience with carbon shafts? I'm sorry, bamboo shafts. I'm sorry, bamboo, because bamboo is hollow. And do they fly differently? Are they any better or any worse? And if so, which do you prefer?
Well, bamboo, okay, yes, I do have some experience with bamboo shafts, and these shafts, they were loved by the flight archers as well, but that it was imported, and the prices got so high that they could not find good quality bamboo arrows. And I use bamboo arrows as well. Bamboo is considered to be the carbon arrow of, and is different. What the difference is, I'll tell you. As you know, there are two variations, let's say, of spine, or two definitions of spine. One of them is the static spine, the other one is the dynamic spine. So the static spine is if you support a shaft on 2 points and put a weight in front, this given weight causes a deflection and you measure this deflection. This is the static spine. But the dynamic spine is different. The dynamic spine is the way that the shaft flexes during release. And it depends on the draw length, on the bow's riser, whether it's eccentric cut bow or not. It depends on your release, whether you're shooting with a thumb release or with 3 fingers or whatever. So dynamic spine varies a lot depending on many different parameters. And of course, not only that, but also when a shaft flexes, oscillation starts. And the bamboo behaves completely different than the wood. So that's why, like many modern carbon arrows that have a wider spectrum of spine, the bamboo also is very forgiving. That's why even the ancient cultures like Mughals, for example, used this material because they had it already as raw material. I mean, it was an endemic species. They had a vast amount of bamboo in India, so it was easier for them to be provided or to be supplied. So therefore, in such traditions, even in Japan, in Kyudo, they also use bamboo. In many Chinese schools of archery, they also use bamboo. So this is why they preferred it, because it's forgiving. If you have a narrow spine spectrum, like in wood, then your technique should be better, much better.
So for this reason, I think I've heard you say in the past that you use bare wooden shafts because it forces you to be more correct with your technique.
Exactly. If you are obsessed in mastering the technique, in enhancing your technique, in improving your technique, then you have to avoid these kind of tools, let's say, that would make it easier. You can be more accurate with a bamboo shaft, or with a modern carbon shaft, especially if it has a wider spectrum of spine. And this is what I really don't want, because if it comes to some pragmatic goals, like for example bow hunting, it makes sense actually to use a bamboo shaft because it's much more forgiving under stress, and you have a goal, and ethical kill is also a part, so you have to do it as humanely as possible. So it's okay. But other than in my training, I never used bamboo shafts for the last decade or something.
Right. I wanted to move on and just ask about a recent Instagram post you did with the Simsek bows, and you were testing them with a chronograph.
Yes.
I'm just going to share the screen.
Yes.
Maybe you can just explain what was happening with the experiment and what you found.
Well, in fact, we tested different brands of bows until now, and we do not test all the bows. We know these manufacturers, these bowyers are quite good, and they really know what they do. So other than Simsek, Tuncay Keskin is a really good bowyer as well, as a Turkish producer, and we tested his bows as well. And lately, Simsek sent us 7 of his models, and some of which are prototypes. And I always liked Simsek bows, by the way. In terms of copying the authentic design, they're very successful. Of course, it's up to the technique. I mean, the production technique as well. These are all resin bows, which means these bows are pressed and shaped in a mold. It's a mixture of epoxy glue and fiberglass. So by using this technique, the shape is usually more closer to the authentic one. That's okay. But the all resin bows are less energy efficient. But Simsek succeeded making very high energy efficient bows by using this technique. So it may depend on the labor, it may depend on the design. Whatever he did, he really did it well. So in the previous tests, I mean the early models, were found to have a very high energy efficiency for all racing bows. And this series that we are testing now, we have been testing these bows with a small group from Tirendaz. Harun Deniz, Kerem Nalcı, Kerem Ağacıkoğlu, and Ozan Ulu are also in. So the tests are continuing, but I can say that the performance is really good. We got some very early energy efficiency calculations. We did it, and we found out that the energy efficiencies are easily over 70%, even with lighter arrows. So they are really good bows. And what I have to say about the testing of these Simsek bows, he provides a wide range of length. So this is really a very good choice for the buyer. Although there is some obsession on short Turkish bows, please let me say here that it is a myth that all the Turkish bows were short, because in the Topkapı Palace Museum's collection, according to the data Ünsal Yücel gave, the shortest bow is 88 centimeter and the longest bow is 135 centimeters.
Wow, so, that's very long.
Yes, and I'm not even talking about the Crimean Tatar bows, who that we know were manufactured in the Ottoman capital, Istanbul, and were much more longer. According to Abdullah Çelebi, there are some Crimean Tatar bows were as long as the modern Olympic recurves.
Wow.
Almost. Amazing. They are so long.
Wow.
So the archers should learn to choose the bow according to their draw length. So this this obsession is based on some misunderstanding of the Ottoman miniatures. They saw some short bows that are bent dramatically, resembling the shape of a tulip, and they thought that all bows are bent like that. Oh. Some of the Simsek bows, the shorter ones, take this shape really. When you draw it 28 inches. Yes. But think about that. I'm an archer who draws to 29.5 inches. What would I do with that bow? Either I'm going to use a shorter draw length, or I have to switch to a longer bow. So
will the longer bows, will they now give up some of their speed because of the longer limb and just the biomechanics of it returning to its original place and things like that?
Well, okay, very good question. You're right, but I have to also say that a longer limb has more material to store more energy. So how can you answer? Okay, when you have longer limbs, then there are more material to store energy. So, but when you release the string, there are more mass.
More mass. That's right. Yeah.
That should be carried together with the arrow. Yeah. So it is not about maximization or minimization, but it is about optimization. Okay. So that's why you have to choose a bow according to your draw length. And that bow should have a sufficient energy storage, but no stacking at your draw length.
Right.
So that's why we are also giving the force draw curves of the bows in our tests. And I'm trying to explain how these force draw curves are interpreted. These videos are being bilingual, so they will be both in Turkish and English. And I will be explaining as good as I can how these force draw curves are read or understood, so that the archers, the buyers, the possible clients will be able to make better choices.
Excellent. I have a question. One more question. Maybe we'll stop it after this one for part 3 about the grip, the bow grip. So yeah, the difference between I think Kepaze, the eagle grip, and a normal modern recurve style. So for example, if I have a pencil here, the Kepaze is more where you're gripping with the three fingers like this and moving with the wrist, whereas a modern version is more like a push like this. So
yes, very similar.
If you can highlight the pros and cons of each, and I guess the Kepaze is more of a traditional one, and I know there are many more different hand grips, but if you could maybe do a short comparison for me of those grips.
Sure. First of all, I'll tell what modern archery says. You know that, I'm sure, but maybe the audiences may be interested in it. In modern archery, it's said there are 3 grip techniques. One of them is high wrist, straight wrist, and low wrist. Okay, and it is shown on a model when you have a straight wrist, high wrist, or low wrist. The bending of the limbs are different, but there is a difference. So it is what the modern archery calls tillering. So there are tillering adjustments on the modern recurves. So the bending of the upper and the lower limb is adjusted to have better performance. So in modern archery, the rationale of different grips is that. But in traditional archery, it's completely different. In traditional archery, first of all, the bows were composite and they were not as consistent as the modern fiberglass recurves. So it was not possible for the ancient archer to adjust the bow by putting stabilizers, putting a clicker, a cushion plunger button, or whatever, because the bow was changing according to when the moisture, the humidity, the relative humidity in the air changed, the bow changed. So that's why the technique compensated many things, like the thumb release, so that the spine and anything less impact on arrow's flight because of the different techniques. So the thumb release was not only because the bows were short and a shorter bow could only be drawn by thumb. It was not the only reason. There were other reasons. And Kepaze was meant to draw an arrow farther back, because if you have an arrow with a broad head, so with a war head, they are usually triangular, sharp heads. So because of that, a regular grip where your index finger and middle finger are in front of the bow, you have a limited draw. So in order to draw a shorter arrow to your draw length, or in order to draw an arrow longer than usual, if it is necessary. For example, you are trying to shoot at a longer range with a less need of accuracy. Think about that. Your bow and arrow shoots 200 meters, a war arrow, I mean, and the enemy is at 250, and it's a crowded a group of people. Then you can draw your bow longer, and with the Kepaze grip, you can add a few inches to have a longer range. So these kind of practical reasons played a role in holding the grip that way. And of course, if you picked up any arrow from the ground, because it was something that the ancient warriors did when they're out of ammunition, they picked up any arrow that they found on the ground and shot. Thumb release, for example, has also such an advantage because you can digest a wider range of spine with this technique. You can shoot shorter arrow, stiffer arrow or weaker arrow with no problem. Of course, in combat distances, in acceptable distances, you can shoot all these arrows with acceptable accuracy. And when you have a short arrow, for example, imagine that you picked up an arrow and it is almost 2 inches or 3 inches shorter than your jaw. Then you can draw it in a Kepaze grip.
Right.
And draw it up to the iç kabza, as we say, so the inner part of the grip, and shoot from here. So in Tirendaz methodology, we are teaching that in later stages into advanced archers. So they are practicing Kepaze as well with all these indications and applications.
Excellent. Okay, that's great. Dr. Murat, I'm aware that you have a curfew in Istanbul at the moment, so I don't want to delay you too much.
Yes, yes. In 40 minutes, I have to be at home.
Yes, I think it will be sensible if we just pause this meeting now before we go on too long. And then if there are further questions, we can do a part 3. But I think we definitely covered a lot more content on this one. It was a lot clearer. So,
I think so.
Once again, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And we will definitely
You're welcome.
plan a part 3. And I'll be following the Instagram posts. If there's anything new, then perhaps we can discuss those as well.
Well, we are going to release the part 2 video of Simsek, but we are following a very strict method. And because of the circumstances of pandemic, one of the test shooters could not come to our day, let's say, testing day, because he had to work. And therefore, it's going to be a little bit late, but we're going to release that video. And then there will be 2 more bows that we will be testing and release the results of. One of them is the new series of Simsek, Crimean Tatar, and the other one is a bow that I take very seriously, which is the Selçuk bow, made by a Tirendaz archer named Selçuk. So his name is Selçuk, and he developed a Selçukian bow. This bow I have been using for more than a year. So he was very meticulous and asked us to use bows. He gave bows to the experienced archers of the group and asked us to try it, to use it, even to torture it. Because I also shot Majra arrows, light arrows, to see what would happen with the bow. And this dart trick shot that I performed, maybe you saw it, that I pierced the bottom of the glass, which was one of the authentic trick shots of the Ottomans. I did with this bow, for example, and it is a Selçukian bow, one of the very first tries. He had studied. We actually, as the group, we studied a lot to understand from the miniatures and from the other depictions of the Selçuk era how this bow really looked like. So, and this bow will be tested soon as well. So depending on our schedule, it may take maybe a few months, but in a few months, all these tests, people who are curious about that.
Excellent. We will definitely keep an eye on that and wait to hear the results of that. I don't know if you remember in the summer when I came to visit, you shot a coin for me in the Tirendaz. So I keep that coin with me in my wallet as a reminder all the time. So it's always a good memory.
Yeah, it was for you, a gift from an archer.
Thank you.
To an archer.
Thank you so much.
And did you ever try to hit a coin from that and a coin from such a short?
Not yet. I have to have the right target first, the layered foam target, and I have to do a little bit more Kepaze training first before I try to attempt that.
Of course.
But anyway, for now, Dr. Murat, thank you once again, and stay safe, and we will stay in touch.
Thank you. I thank you very much, Jihad. And thank you for repeating this interview, because really I got some critics about that, and thank you for compensating that.
No problem. Thank you very much. Take care.
See you later.